And we will officially start. Welcome everyone to the Arizona ACES Consortium webinar on funding for resilient schools. Our presenter today is going to be Rene RedDay. Rene, I will let her introduce herself because nobody likes to sit through their own bios being read. But most importantly for us, she is our chair for the Resilience Coordinating Council. Thank you, Rene.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I was scanning through to see who we had in the room. So I think we have a lot of experts in from diverse places. I'm glad to have you here. I know I always need it for myself. So as a welcome and as we arrive, I'm just going to invite us all to take a few breaths to let go of what we were just a part of, what we're just doing, what's coming after this webinar, and to just arrive in this moment. So feel free to close your eyes if you'd like. I'm just going to take a few deep breaths. Okay, so again, welcome. It is one of our resiliency tools, right? Just mindfulness, just being present, giving ourselves an opportunity to be in the present moment among our busy lives, wearing multiple hats. So again, I'm Rene RedDay. I'm here in Flagstaff, a longtime early childhood and family advocate. More recently, launched a consultancy focused on community engagement. So really honing in on the voices of families and community, and providing some facilitation wherever that might be needed to facilitate internal dialogues, dialogues among partners, and engagement and community relations. So grateful to be here, grateful to be a part of the Arizona Adverse Early Childhood Consortium, our Early Experiences Consortium, as well as Angie mentioned, a co-chair along with Shamari Jackson for the Resiliency Council, which is a subcommittee of the consortium. Thanks all for being here. I think we have just about an hour. So hopefully this presentation can be beneficial to you. So like I said, I'm a part not only of the consortium, but also of the subcommittee. And our subcommittee is really focused on supporting wellness within schools for our teachers, for our staff, and so that our kids can be happy, healthy, and safe. So we know that our schools face many challenges, funding being one of them, teacher recruitment, teacher retention. We have a lot of challenges that are out there. But we know, especially through COVID and our post-COVID world, how central schools are to our communities. For individual students, individual families, but also our collective communities. And so the Resiliency Council really wants to make sure that there is a statewide effort to support the health of our schools. There's many ways where that can happen, and many challenges that we face, but our role, our intent is to really support that wellness to improve better outcomes. As the slide references, we know that aside from funding and other resources that impact our schools' concerns, there's also ACEs. and the adverse childhood experiences. The ACEs study, which Angie can put a link to in the chat if there's any of you who are not familiar. I saw from some of the intros that many of you are already familiar with ACEs and working on teams. Let's build resiliency. So we appreciate that you're here. But if there are some of you that are unfamiliar with the ACE study, Angie can put that in the chat. We know that it's not only, so as the slide says, that we're all impacted by ACEs, whether that's personally, whether that's within our families, whether that's in our classrooms, our schools, or our community. Therefore, we want to be responsive. We know that adverse childhood experiences impacts how children and our staff learn, cope with stress, form friendships, and actually can extend into adulthood as well and have implications for that as well. But the good news is there are solutions and that they must be implemented. So part of our presentation today is not only to recognize the impact of ACEs, but for those of you who recognize the importance and the need to address and be responsive to trauma, giving some tools, particularly funding mechanisms to implement those tools. So we know that trauma and adversity impacts school communities. Like I said, whether this is with students or with our staff as well. Adversity can impact how students learn, which may create gaps in learning that can be reflected in test scores. That impact on learning might also have an output of student conduct, children having difficulty within schools just with self-regulation, which may impact the number of absences a child has or suspensions a school has. And both of these gaps in learning and student conduct can impact both teacher job satisfaction as well as retention. So have a negative impact on that job satisfaction for teachers and ultimately teacher retention. So all of this impacts schools as a whole on many different levels. Our ACEs consortium is made up of many diverse representatives from multiple organizations who shared these statistics with us. That 17% of students reported experiencing a major depressive episode. 56% of those who have major depressive episodes did not receive treatment. 66% of youth with untreated mental illness do not advance into college. So it has an impact past secondary school. And 22% of our students have a rate of chronic absenteeism. So these adversities are impacting their ability to participate in school on a regular basis. And 25% of our students have reported missing school because they feel unsafe. So some of our traumas happen within schools, not necessarily simply outside of schools. So these are pretty staggering statistics that really point to a need for intentional interventions. So having those statistics there, we as a consortium and as a resiliency council really wants to make sure that we support schools through facilitated discussions, professional development, and make sure that we can support some collaborative strategies. So with support from the Vitalist Foundation, the Resiliency Council really aims to increase baseline knowledge for all school staff and increase leadership development statewide. So wherever you are in the state of Arizona, there is support through the consortium and through the Resiliency Council to increase that baseline knowledge. Like I've said, we really want to work alongside of schools to enhance school employee wellness. We did multiple focus groups, believe it was in the fall, and heard from educators and educational leaders across the state. And they pointed to employee wellness, knowing that staff within schools, their health is critical. We need to have healthy adults if we aim to have healthy kiddos. So it's a intention of ours, really our why for being here, is to increase that employee wellness. And we know to do that, there's many mechanisms that we can put in place that don't necessarily have a dollar value to them. However, to make a significant and coordinated effort within school sites or school districts, there is funding necessary so that there's a lead or funding available for specific interventions. So establishing these funding mechanisms is in the hands of schools themselves, but we're hoping that this webinar and presentation can provide some tools, some links to increase that funding and support trauma responsive and resilient schools, as I said, throughout the state. We are grateful that our Resiliency Council represents cross-sector collaboration. So we have members from the consortium, Vitalist Health Foundation, providing not only some financial support, but also engaged in the conversations from their collective lens on how to move this effort forward of support and funding. Arizona Department of Health Services is engaged in the conversation and providing some support. Arizona Department of Education is in the conversation and providing webinars. Access is engaged in our conversation, as well as diverse stakeholders. And again, from across the state. So, I mean, I really think that that's a message in all of this too, that wherever we can engage cross sectors in a collaborative conversations, collaborative planning, collaborative implementation, we all benefit. So grateful to say that the information provided in this presentation and ongoing conversations are cross-sector and they are collaborative. So thank you for those of you who are in the room that represent these groups. And to those who are outside of these groups, please know that some of these big players are a part of both conversations and support of implementation. And so thank you all for being here. Like we said, having collaboration is key. And we recognize that implementation of trauma responsive strategies requires an ongoing organizational kind of paradigm shift, right? With knowledge, perspectives, attitudes, skills. It's something that happens over time. it's not a one and done. Any resiliency supporting strategies are really things that are practices that deepen over time. And we know that um, to make these paradigm shifts requires buy-in and support from district leadership, school boards, school leadership. Um, when that buy-in happens, staff and families, relationship development with staff and families is being modeled, right? So once the districts buy in, then showing that collaborative relationship development, um, modeling that, modeling the value of collaboration, recognizing that all staff within a site, so having one staff go to, say, a trauma responsive training isn't enough, right? This needs to be collaborative and coordinated across both schools. We would love to see it be across districts and, like we said, across the state. So there's a lot of needs that are out there, but it starts with buy-in, development of relationships, and making sure that it happens collaboratively and in a coordinated manner across schools and across districts. To make this effective, really requires input, student input, family input into what trauma responsive policies and environments look like, where the priorities lead. Really need to take or engage the voice of both students and families. And like we said, once there is buy-in from leadership, there's some voice from families and students. The intention is that it is collaborative and coordinated efforts. That baseline piece where it starts is really education for all staff within schools, across districts, that support staff in understanding neurobiology, adversity, collective trauma, self-regulation, resilience, all of those pieces. Whole staffs need to be a part of. That would help increase that baseline knowledge, like we said, of how of these may impact student learning, how they may impact children's ability to regulate, which impacts their behaviors in the classroom, and school responses to some of these behaviors. What lens we look at some of these behaviors from is all important. So really, the implementation of trauma responses, a policy across schools and across districts, begin with making sure that one, that there's some buy-in, but two, a lot of education so that teachers and all staff can see the relationship between adversities and student conduct and student learning. We have so much information from multiple groups across our state that are evidence-informed, that can help to mitigate the impact of toxic stress. So whether these take the form of exercise, nutrition, mindfulness, we all took our little mindfulness, a few breaths there, and even just taking mindfulness breaks, how that can support self-regulation of both staff and students, having time within nature, having calming spaces. So there's many ways that we can mitigate that toxic stress. But for it to have a positive impact, there needs to be some education across schools, across districts. And also integrating history and culture into staff education, policy, and practice. Adversities, happen in many ways, some within homes, some within communities, and some within systemic structures that can have a negative impact, particularly of those of diverse cultures and underrepresented cultures. So when we see all of these pieces together, I mean, to summarize, it really is having buy-in from the highest level of leadership who are modeling wanting to have these positive relationships, work in collective and collaborative ways, select priorities based on the voice of students and families, prioritizing education for all staff so that they can implement evidence-informed strategies in a culturally appropriate way. There we are. And so our vision as a resiliency council is to provide information and tools to leaders, district leaders, school-based leaders, community leaders, to initiate that and identify braided funding sources so that all Arizona schools have the desire, support, and funding to ensure full implementation of trauma responsive and resilient policy and practices. So it's not that everybody needs to come up with this on their own, but that we look for those opportunities for collaboration to braid funding. And, you know, collaboration only starts if we have educational leaders that are vested and trying to be responsive to the trauma that our students and families and staff encounter in their day-to-day life. When we recognize that being responsive is a priority, we hope that it's also a priority to look for some braided funding sources. No one has to do this alone. There's many folks invested in the success of our schools. So working together, both on implementation and identifying funding sources and working those together is where we hope that we see some success. Like I said, not all responsive strategies require funding. However, if it is meant to be a school-wide or district-wide intervention, most likely it would take funding to have a lead, to spearhead policies and then strategies, and then implementation of those strategies definitely would take either a school-based or a district-wide lead to make sure that that there's funding available, but that also that there's that support, right? There's that, like we said, all of this deepens over time, and having a site-based or district-based lead to facilitate that growth and that deepening will take some funding. So the remainder of this PowerPoint is meant to share with you some funders across the state, some organizational leads that are being helpful to school districts, and hopefully pique your interest on where some of that funding can come from, and your investment of time to identify those sources and to deepen that knowledge across schools. So these players are engaged statewide. There's the Arizona ACES Consortium, providing training and facilitating interagency strategies. So the consortium itself is a great place to start. Arizona Department of Education has a variety of webinars related to resiliency on their website. Across the state, ESSER funds are available at the elementary and secondary school level that have some dollars available for emergency relief funds that are really flexible and how they can be used. SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, and their Center for Mental Health Services, currently have some cooperative agreements for school-based trauma-informed support services and mental health services for children and youth. So there are some statewide players that are out there, each available and willing to provide resources, provide information, provide support. So the consortium, Department of Education, ESSER funds, and SAMHSA. So each of these are players that are willing to support schools and districts across the state, deepen their knowledge, and support implementation of responsive strategies. Within tribal nations, ADE is supporting school health and safety team. They're working currently with the Pinon School District to implement, and this is another link Angie had asked for you to put in the chat, CDC's Whole Child, Whole Community, Whole School. I said that slightly backwards. I'll do it once again. The CDC's Whole School, Whole Community, Whole Child model, and Angie will put that link in the chat, which is a student-centered, unified, and collaborative approach designed to improve learning and health in schools. So one, there's a model that you can reference, and two, ADE is available to support individual schools and districts statewide, and understanding what this model means, what it looks like, and how it could implement. So currently they're working on tribal nations, but since they are implementing and supporting some of this work, that also be available to answer questions, share what this model looks like, and discuss implementation as well. And this slide, you know, it's one of those things where, as we talk about where is the funding coming from to increase these resiliency practices within schools, during a council meeting, a resiliency council meeting, it was brought up, you know, sometimes we don't have to look for additional funding. It's utilizing differently, potentially differently, some funds that schools already have available to them. So professional development funds, Title I funds, both of those sources are funds that are already available to schools and districts, and it's a matter of how we write in to be able to use them, right? So we can use some of these funds to increase staff and family knowledge of evidence-informed and culturally relevant strategies to increase that baseline knowledge, both of staff and of families. Staff includes leadership, includes teachers, includes support staff. So there are funds that are available that you can tailor to meet these needs of students and staff in a responsive way, in a culturally responsible way, a responsive way, to increase that baseline knowledge, both of staff and families, as well as receiving support with implementation. In Northern Arizona, where I'm at, particularly Coconino County, as I mentioned, my business is Building Community. We provide consultations, facilitation, professional development for a service fee, but it is, as a social entrepreneurship, it really is meant to be a win-win, both for my business and for schools and nonprofits as well. So the fee is nominal. Coconino Coalition for Children and Youth is active throughout the county. There's membership dues and grants that help fund no-cost webinars, virtual trainings that can be tailored to your organizational needs, as well as facilitating interagency strategies. Coconino County Education Service Agency is the holder in Coconino County of those ESSER funds. Those funds started to be available in fiscal year 22. It'll carry through to fiscal year 25 to be able to work with districts individually to see what their needs are and how those funds can be utilized to support implementation of culturally relevant practices, responsive strategies, providing training and coaching to districts and schools at no cost to schools themselves. All of those services are provided through those ESSER funds. Coconino County Public Health Services District funds Stronger as One and Youth Mental Health First Aid. Flagstaff Unified School District as a whole is funding school-based counselors and restorative practices. And Native Americans for Community Action provides some mental health first aid and suicide prevention efforts. And we mentioned in the statewide, but that SAMHSA, SAMHSA is funding began in fiscal year 20 and extends to fiscal year 25 to ensure all students eligible for Medicaid can receive behavioral health services within the school setting at no cost. And you'll see the contact information there. Sarah and her email through Health Choice Arizona or a phone number. And again, that's available to provide behavioral health services within the school at no cost. The cost is absorbed by SAMHSA. So many available in Coconino County in northern Arizona. In central Arizona, ADE has school health and safety teams currently supporting Glendale School District. That began in fiscal year 18 and stretches to fiscal year 23. Again, implementing that CDC whole school, whole community, whole child model. I think that that's definitely one that I invite all of us to check out and learn more about. ADE can provide some more information on that. Arizona ACES Consortium also has funding for the Resilience Empowerment Project through Maricopa Department of Public Health. Angie, any words that you want to share about the Empowerment Project?
So we are currently enrolling new schools for 23-24 school year. If you're interested, you can go to, and I'll put the link in the chat, of course, the azaces.org/Maricopa. We have super blessed to be funded by the Maricopa County Department of Public Health to provide the community-wide training in Maricopa, which also not only is the training at no cost for the schools, but we do offer stipends for the schools, and we also have stipends for a trauma-informed ambassador that helps with the on the ground things, right, in between staff and concerns and those pieces like that. So I can put that information in there. We are also towards the end of summer, fall, sometimes we'll be opening up a training of the trainer for the Resilience Empowerment Project model, which will be available, is one of the ways that we're looking at expanding it across Arizona, is to bring this training, to train community members, community organizations across Arizona to be able to do this training in their own community. Specifically for our schools, we have 3 different levels of training, and we look at it as a 3-year program, right? The first year is 12 hours, the second year is 8 hours, and the third year is 4 hours. We also have youth training that is 3 50-minute trainings, which are on stress and resilience and brain science, really just kind of teaching those teens what the impact of stress has on their systems and on their brains, ways to develop resilience, and also community organization training. So we can really look at it as a full community-wide program.
Excellent. Thanks, Angie. And another resource, like I said, it is statewide, so that would include Central Arizona, is SAMHSA. And you can contact grants at mercycare.org, or there's a phone number here. That is specific to Central Arizona. Those services began in fiscal year 20 and will carry through fiscal year 25. To ensure that all students that are eligible for Medicaid can receive behavioral health services within the school setting at no cost to the school. So hopefully some of these resources are helpful to you. Hopefully folks are taking notes on where those are. Like we said, it starts with buy-in, and then with connection, with knowing who's out there doing some of this great work, and who can provide services within schools, sites, and within school districts. In Southern Arizona, ADE has the School Health and Safety Team, currently working with Sunnyside Unified School District. They began in fiscal year 18. It'll carry through this year, fiscal year 23. And again, implementing that CDC whole school, whole community, whole child model, which is student-centered, and a collaborative approach to improve learning and health in schools. I was excited, this was a new one to me, but ASU, their School of Social Work, is promoting culturally centric, trauma-informed, and resiliency building health interventions. So ASU School of Social Work can also is currently supporting some Southern Arizona schools with resources, but we can also reach out to them for more information of what that looks like within schools. The National Center for Community Health and Resiliency, in partnership with ASU Center for Resilient Families, began their collaborative in fiscal year 21, and it'll carry through fiscal year 24. Their partnership works first with community healthcare workers. They can deliver specialized training to deliver culturally responsive interventions to children and families that are experiencing traumatic stress. There is a study to create some national performance indicators, conducting some special studies, and providing technical assistance to sites. Researchers are examining how the interventions by community health workers were implemented and will recommend practices and policies for improvements. So again, this in ASU Center for Resilient Families is one, providing this training for community health workers, but then studying the training and the impact that those trainings have had on healthcare workers and implementation of services, and will finalize in recommending some practice and policies for improvement. And like we said, SAMHSA is across the state, so that'll also reach to Southern Arizona. Began in fiscal year 20, stretches to fiscal year 25, to ensure that all students that are Medicaid eligible receive behavioral health services within the school setting at no cost to the schools. And the contact in Southern Arizona is Elizabeth Berry. There's an email there and a phone number as well. So SAMHSA is across the state, but each region has a different contact. And there's always grants. You know, in some of our rural areas, applying for grants can be a challenge. Some of our urban schools might be more resourced and able to apply for these grants, but grants are open across the state. There's a campaign for trauma-informed policy and practice. You can email advocacy at ctipp.org. And these federal grants are open to state entities, county entities, 501c3 entities, tribal nations, and institutes of higher learning as well.
And I did put, sorry, Renee, I also put a link for CTIP in the chat that takes you to their resource page. They have a specific webinar and resources on 5 grants that are now open for trauma responsive practices within schools.
Awesome. Thanks, Angie. There we go. So we hope that this webinar provided some more information on who's engaged in the work, who is supporting the work of resilient schools, healthy schools for children and staff across our state. Our next step is to really give you a call to action. Here is a link to the trauma-sensitive self-assessment that we invite you to take. And then see what those, as that self-assessment may identify some needs or some low-hanging fruit, right? What is the best or most efficient, next step to take? We invite you to visit some of these webinars and resources at azaces.org, which is the consortium, as well as Department of Ed sites or coconinokids.org sites. Contact an organization in your area that was named in this presentation to request a consultation, a training, or support. And of course, we invite you to join the consortium. Stay engaged with information that is coming through, be a part of one of our action teams, utilize the resources that are on the webinars. But we consider each of you part of the team and would really love you to join as a member and stay engaged.
I do want to let everyone know that that link on the Arizona Department of Education website that was current when we put this presentation together a few months ago, no longer goes to those webinars. So we will find out with the new, if there's a way to access that information, and I will put that with the recording link and all of that will be on the website, and we'll email it out afterwards.
Thank you, Angie. And if this seems like a lot of work, slightly overwhelming, we know schools already have a lot on their plate. They face lots of challenges, always implementing strategies to be responsive. So if you need some encouragement, your school and agency might already be doing some of this work. And if so, we'd love to know about that, and we'd love to add that to resources within the ACES Consortium website. But if you need a little encouragement to say, how do we already do this? How is this already happening? You can also reach out to some of these schools. Just know that in Northern Arizona, I know that Flagstaff Unified School District, Killip Elementary is doing a lot of this work. Summit High School, which is an alternative high school, is doing some amazing work and have seen some amazing results by implementing some of these strategies. Mindfulness, quiet spaces for kids, restorative justice practices, all of those pieces. Each of these schools can speak to how they have significantly positively impacted student and family engagement and test scores across the board. The same with Pinon School District. In Central Arizona, Glendale, Mesa, Phoenix, Balez Elementary, Madison School District, Tempe Union High School District, Arizona School for the Deaf and Blind, and numerous charter schools have implemented, found the funding, and started implementation at a systemic level for enhancing school health and wellness and resiliency practices, and have seen some great results. In Southern Arizona, Sunnyside Unified School District has implemented some practices and prioritized that resiliency within schools, and have seen a significant improvement within their schools and test scores and attendance. So I just wanted to include this one to say, if you represent one of these schools or district, kudos to you. Thank you for being leaders and prioritizing health and resiliency within schools. And for those of you who have the interest but haven't yet approached implementation, just know it can be done, and any one of these schools or districts could speak to you of how that work has positively impacted both their students and their staff. So kudos and a little inspiration for you all. I know we only have a few minutes left, but we have about 10 minutes left. So I just wanted to open the floor to some questions. Does anyone either feel free to raise a hand, and Angie can look out for that. If you have a question, a comment, a consideration, something that you'd want to share with the group. Angie, do you see any hands or anything coming through the chat? I haven't seen anything in the chat yet.
I don't, but there was a lot of information and a lot of links. I'm completely aware of all of those that were in there. I did put instructions if you wanted to save the chat, that will save the document to your computer. You can click the three dots in the chat box. And it'll give you the opportunity to save the chat. Otherwise, I will be sending all of the links in the follow-up email, and I will be putting them on the website also. And of course, we're always here if you have any information, any questions at all. If you have information on grants and funding sources that we didn't present here, that you would like to have highlighted at any point in the future, please let us know and we will put those there. Really, our goal is to help unsilo some of the work that we're doing, right? There's really great work being done across the state. And sometimes it's really just, acting as that connector between groups. And that's really our goal here.
Excellent. Let's see. Well, like Angie said, I mean, we intentionally did make this PowerPoint short. I believe it will go up on the consortium website as well. We wanted to be responsive of your time, make sure the resources that we've found about, we had to do some digging to be able to find them, were easily available to any school or community leader across the state. And this webinar was honestly a part to build a relationship, right? We know how much relationships matters, that anytime that there's this systemic change, it starts with relationships that are built on trust. We know that it's individuals, individual people, individual leaders, individual teachers, individual staff, not necessarily programs that make the necessary change, right? So you're not doing it alone, but it does require a paradigm shift. And that paradigm shift starts with relationships. So if you are in this webinar today and we have had an established relationship, thanks for being here, knowing that you have already the information on trauma and resiliency and health. We thank you for being here. If you've already had that relationship with us, if you are new to the table and joining us, we hope that not only did this provide information for you, but also was the start of our relationship that will be built on trust, and know that our intent is to be in relationship with you, provide some information, provide some support, and just know that you have others that are on the team. And if you have interest in these topics and school health and school wellness and school resiliency, that there is support and there's other people here that want to have that relationship with you. So thank you for being here. And last slide, here it is. Please reach out to the consortium. So this was the start of a relationship, maybe a start for some of the content and resources that we want you to have. So please reach out to the ACES consortium. I'm sure, yep, there's our website down there. Please reach out to the consortium as a whole, to me individually, or to my business building community. There is a QR code that you can also scan that would connect you to us as well. So we really appreciate your time. We definitely don't want this to be a one and done. We want this to be the start of both a relationship and a conversation that happens within your school or with your organization, as well as across the state. And so if any of the information also, I'll invite you to, we shared information in this PowerPoint of resources that we are aware of. There very well may be many more resources or implementation happening across the state that we are unaware. So we invite you to, one, reach out to us if there's information that you'd like to receive, but we also invite you to share information. If there's strategies, practices happening across the state that you're aware of that were not represented in this, please let us know. We'd love to include it and promote it and share it and celebrate it across our state. So again, thank you so much for being a part of our conversation, being a part of this webinar, being a part of this collective effort across our state. I want to thank you for your time. I hope you found it beneficial. And if you have questions, comments, or concerns that you'd like to share, again, please reach out via the chat or via email to either myself or the organization. And I see some accolades in there. So thank you so much for sharing some thank yous and sharing that it was beneficial. That was most definitely our intent. So I will consider this the end. Look at that. You have 2 whole minutes back to your day. So give yourself some good self-care, some mindful breaths, and we appreciate you being here.